Good afternoon. Thanks for joining Family Caregiver Alliance for Dementia Proofing Your Home. I'm Calvin Hu, Education Coordinator at FCA and your host. For nearly 4 decades, FCA has been working across the Bay Area and the nation to improve the well-being of family caregivers. We offer support through consultations, classes, workshops, publications, retreats, research, and advocacy. If you'd like to learn more about us or access our online tool, FCA Care Journey, please visit our website, www.caregiver.org. And now for some quick housekeeping. During the webinar, your phones or mics are going to be muted. So if you have any questions, you can ask them by using the chat-style question box on your screen. We'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. We're also going to be asking you to give some feedback at the conclusion of the webinar, and we do use this to help shape future education programs, including webinars. So I'd like to thank you all in advance for filling those out, as we really do value and appreciate your comments. So today I'd like to welcome Carol Larkin. Carol is an expert in Alzheimer's and related dementia care. She specializes in helping and working with families dealing with these very difficult dementia challenges. She has a Master's of Applied Gerontology from the University of North Texas. She is a certified Alzheimer's educator, a dementia care practitioner, and a certified geriatric care manager. Carol is also a writer for Alzheimer'sReadingRoom.com. You can find many of her blog posts there and articles. She consults with families in North Texas and also nationwide on problems related to the various dementias. Her company is Third Age Services, LLC, which is based out in Dallas, Texas. And you can find more about her consulting and also her company at thirdageservices.com, so that's all one word. Or you can drop her an email at thirdageservices@gmail.com. So now that you know a little bit more about our guest, I'd like to turn things over to Carol.
Thank you very much, Calvin. Today we are going to talk about dementia-proofing your home. For many people, their home represents their life accomplishments, especially true for individuals that are diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's disease and their care partners. You know, most families want to keep their loved one at home for as long as possible so the person can be in familiar surroundings. Therefore, in order to do that, we want to try and create as safe an environment as we can for your loved one so they can still remain at home. When caring for a person with Alzheimer's or another dementia in the home, of course, it's important to try and avoid accidents or to minimize injuries in the event of an accident, and also to remove the what I call triggers that could cause agitation or other challenging behaviors. Next slide, please, Calvin. So the following are going to be suggestions for safe proofing your home. It's important to accommodate the needs of not only the person with dementia, but the needs of the care partner as well. I want you to know that there are no fixed rules about any of this. There couldn't possibly be fixed rules because each person with the dementia is different, each caregiver is different, each home is different, and the behaviors change during the course of the disease. So one of the things that many people don't think about when they're dementia-proofing their home is, well, one of the things that they most think about is memory loss, and that's very important. But another very important sector of this is the loss of the ability of logic and reasoning. We call it executive functions, and people can get into deep trouble by their declining executive functions. So it is important to realize all the way through this that the person with dementia is going to be unlearning as opposed to learning things. So it's reasonable for us to expect the logic and their reason in relation to their actions decreases. It's logical for us to expect that as the disease goes along, they'll be less and less able to control their impulses and to anticipate consequences from their actions. Therefore, we're going to need to try and do it. One of the common things that happens along with the disease is that those people with the disease may begin to not recognize common household objects and the purpose for them. And that's when the care partner needs to be very vigilant so that they don't misuse the product or object in front of them. And finally, as disease progresses, it's more and more difficult for the person who has dementia and may be in danger to be able to call out for help. They just may not know how to do it. Next slide, please. So, in saying this, I don't want everybody out there to think that they need to do everything that I'm going to suggest all at once. It's just too much, it's overwhelming, and people would give up. My point here is that these are suggestions for you to think about when you start seeing these behaviors. Hopefully you will start with a plan, and starting with a plan could be as simple as looking at your home, surveying your home thoroughly before you begin making any changes. Next slide, please. When you're looking at your house, look at every single last room and also the garage. Many people don't think about the garage, but the garage could have very many things that are harmful to your loved one. I want you to look at the house as if you had your 2-year-old grandchild or 5-year-old grandchild or 8-year-old grandchild living there with you. Not that the person with dementia acts like a 2-year-old, 5-year-old, or 8-year-old, although sometimes they might during the later courses of the disease. But I want you to look at it with fresh eyes as if you were a person who was beginning to unlearn things rather than learn things. Also, I'd like for you to think about the house as if your loved one had permanent balance problems that they could never quite get their feet underneath them. Of course, we know it's not true, but in excess of caution, if you look that way for things that might trip them up or cause them to have even more imbalance, then you are ahead of the game. Next slide, please. One of the basic concepts of dementia-proofing your home is to try and simplify everything in the house. That is because it becomes, as the disease progresses, it becomes more difficult for the people with the disease to actually process the environmental stimulus, meaning the environment of the home, process that, and when it's not processed quickly or well, then that tends to cause confusion and sometimes agitation or anger, or leading to other undesirable behaviors, if you will. So to simplify everything, you want to think about creating maybe walking paths through the house. And the paths should be straight and as direct as possible. For example, a path from the kitchen to the bathroom they normally use should not have too many impediments in front of it, meaning furniture that might be in the way should be moved out of the way. Throw rugs that could be tripped on should be either picked up or tacked down with the Velcro sort of stuff, or the mats underneath the rugs. Reducing clutter is an important thing if it can be done. And I'm talking about reducing clutter bit by bit, slowly. And that is if your person seems as if they get agitated by too much visual stimulation. You can tell because they're looking all over the place all the time and can't concentrate on you, for example, when you talk to them. So reducing clutter would be helpful if that's your person. Utilizing labels for objects, say in drawers or in the kitchen for dishes or silverware, is very useful in the beginning because people always want to be helpful. Even people with dementia want to be helpful, useful, purposeful, and it will help them be more independent if it's very obvious where things go. Next slide, please. I want you to think about your house as having 3 zones in it. The first zone I want to talk about is the high danger zone. And that could be rooms that you should think about eventually making off limits to your loved one. That would be possibly the garage if there's power tools in it. Even portions of rooms can be dangerous. For example, in the bathroom or in the kitchen, there could be, and there are usually, cabinets or drawers that are holding things that are dangerous and can be dangerous to somebody who doesn't realize what they are or what the consequences of using them too much or too little are. So the easiest thing to do when you start seeing your loved one fumble around and indicate to you that they don't actually understand what this is, the easiest thing to do is really to lock the drawers. And you can do that through, believe it or not, child locks sometimes. And they can be obtained at Home Depot or Lowe's, or even Babies R Us if there's one near you. Okay, next slide, please. Before I get to this slide, I do want to name some areas that could be danger zones that I didn't indicate before. And I did say the garage, but I also want to name the basement, attics if you have one, workshops or hobby rooms, things that even have machinery, or hobby rooms may have paint in them. Needless to say, staircases could be dangerous to be going up and down if there aren't rails to hold on to. Outdoors can be dangerous, meaning pools or spas or unfenced areas. So you want to think about those as possible danger zones. Computer rooms could be considered dangerous because of the electronic gear that's there. And finally, there's portions of the kitchen that can be considered dangerous as well. The next zone I like to talk about is what I call the respite zone, and that is where either the person with dementia or the caregiver can go to take a break. And each of them need to take a break for a different reason. When the caregiver or care partner it's just too much, and they find themselves yelling or getting angry or doing things that they'd rather not do and are embarrassed they're doing towards their loved one with dementia. That's where the respite room is, where someplace that they can calm themselves down and take a break, take a few big breaths and just calm down and relax so that they don't start screaming at their loved one again. On the side of the person with dementia, there are plenty of times that they need a place to go where they can take a break. I call it a timeout, but without any of the negative punishing things that parents do for, timeouts with children. It's just, I'm really talking about a place where the person with the dementia can relax, and that's why I'm talking about things that would relax that person. Could be music, it could be magazines, it could be books, it could be pictures of the family. You know best which would distract and calm down your loved one. Next slide, please. The third and final zone is what I call the safe zone, and that is pretty much most of the house, one would think. Talking about the safe zone, one of the most important things in the portions of the house that are used most commonly is to have adequate light, especially if it's possible to have natural light come in the windows whenever it is possible. It really does, and this research has proved, natural light helps improve their mood, their meaning the people with dementia, improves their mood and helps them calm down and be more present in the present. At night, you really want to try and avoid shadows, deep shadows, especially on the way to the bathroom, but also deep shadows anywhere, because it could possibly have that person imagining that they see things in those shadows. So if we can get rid of the shadows or at least minimize them, then it may help with some of the fear and the paranoia that may come up during the mid stages of the disease. One of the things I do want to mention is that People with a dementia, not all, but some people with a dementia have tendencies to have changes in their vision, and sometimes their vision, it becomes such that they cannot see glass on a like sliding glass door, and they think it's outside and they attempt to walk through it. That's why I'm saying if that begins to happen, you should consider a decal or something else at their eye level so that they can see that there's an impediment to straight outdoors, and hopefully indicate to them that they shouldn't go straight ahead and bump themselves on the sliding glass door. Next slide, please. One of the most important areas to try and get some safety to and for is the bathroom. Probably more accidents occur in bathrooms and kitchens than they do any place else in the house, and that's logical because bathrooms and kitchens are can be wet, and that's all the more reason why people slip and slide in them and fall. If you can add shelving units behind the toilet to display toilet paper or clean towels or Kleenex or other items, having them right out in front of the person, that may help them not to try and bend down and reach for something in at a lower level and cause them to go off balance and fall. It also helps eliminate some confusion for them. If you could, if it's possible for you to do this, pick up throw rugs, bathroom rugs, or at least use the ones with rubber backing or a mat underneath it, because it does help minimize those slips and falls. If it's possible to lower the household water heater temperature to 110 degrees or less, it's important, because during the disease, some people mid-stage forget how to temper the water, meaning, you know, mix hot and cold so that it's not too hot or not too cold. Well, if you lower the hot water temperature, which is usually at 120 degrees or above, if you lower that hot water temperature, then you have less of a chance for it to cause burns, and that's a good thing. In the bathroom, if you can remove or at least unplug any of those electrical devices, that would help minimize the chance of electrocution. Let's see. Trying to make the room a little warmer for those people who get cold very easily, and that's many people. If you try and make the room a little warmer using a heating lamp in the ceiling as opposed to a space heater, which is never really advised, that may help the person who could be reticent to take showers because they're too cold. Preheating the room may help with that. It goes without saying that there should be grab bars along the wall inside the shower if it's they're using a shower. And also, as you see your person get more unstable on their feet, perhaps grab bars along the sides of the toilets so that they can use those to lower themselves and raise themselves up off the toilet. I should note, grab bars really do need to be fixed into the wall. The suction cup grab bars traditionally will let loose, and they just don't work well. You might as well go the whole route and get the grab bars that are actually put right in the wall. If your person has issues with too much hearing, believe it or not too little, but that sounds disturb them like too much noise, then you might want to think about eliminating the exhaust fan, because that noise may add to other things and cause them confusion. I know most people have the opposite problem, but there are a few people that have overstimulation auditorily, sort of like an autistic person. Next slide, please. Calvin?
Yes, it's up right now.
Oh, okay, thank you. The second most dangerous place in the house is the kitchen. And I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know already. Reducing the amount of items on the top of the counter can help with too much visual stimulation and can produce confusion. Let's see. If you have appliances like toasters or blenders or microwaves or whatever, electronic things, they really should be unplugged. And I'll tell you at the end of this a true story about one of my clients who didn't have that unplugged and unfortunately came to a bad end. So they should be unplugged, and even the stove should have the ability to be turned off, and you could have a switch installed that's an on-off switch, just not put in an obvious place, because people in mid-stage dementia, if they can't see it easily and readily, then it just doesn't exist for them. So you can have a switch, or if the stove has knobs, you want to either take off the knobs and put them in a drawer, or cover the knobs with something else. There are covers for knobs and doors at places like Home Depot and Kids R Us and all of that. You want to cover those so that they don't inadvertently burn themselves or burn the house down with using the stove if it's past their capabilities to turn it off. Again, you need to be vigilant, because there are times, it's like a moving target. There are times when somebody looks able to, but as soon as they leave the stove on once, then you should assume it's going to happen again, and that's when you would start covering things covering knobs and things like that. You want to check the refrigerator too, at least every couple of weeks for spoiled food, and get rid of it because of the obvious reasons. They can get sick on it. Finally, you should disconnect or remove the microwave if they begin to not understand that certain things can't be microwaved. Here's my story. I had a client once whose husband was an early onset Alzheimer's, and while she was in the house but in another room, he decided he wanted something to eat and he wanted it warmed up in the microwave. He did, I forget what the item was, he put it in the microwave, but he put it in the microwave with a metal container. The microwave blew up and he was burned over, I don't know, 50% of his body. Eventually, unfortunately, he died of his burns and injuries. So that's a really going all the way story, but just to let you know that those things really can happen. Next slide, please. Okay, talking about wandering out of the house, that is a safety issue. I don't know if you guys know this, but over 60% of people with Alzheimer's or dementia will wander out of the house. It is not unusual. As a matter of fact, it's more usual than not. And of course, if somebody tells them don't do it and their memory isn't so good, then of course they won't remember not to do it, and they will go. They also may think that they are not in their home and they need to go to another home, or that they're looking for their real home, which normally is a home that they lived in before, whether it was growing up or a previous home. If they wander, you want to try and prevent it if it's at all possible. And like I say, if they wander once, you can assume that they're going to wander. Prevention is so much better than trying to find them after they're out. It's sort of closing the barn door before the horse gets out. If that's the case with your loved ones, then you want to allow them to wander, pace, whatever you want to call it, walk in the house in the safe zones rather than out of the house. Doing things like making the safe zone doors easy to use, like putting door levers on them if your person has arthritis, rather than trying to twist the knobs, and conversely, making places within the house not available to them by locking the doors on unsafe rooms. That is a very good thing, because they still get to wander as they wish, just are doing it safely. To try and help people not wander out of the house, you can, some of the techniques to help avoid that is putting a bolt, a bolt type lock on the front door and the back door if there's no fenced backyard, above their eyesight, high enough so that you can reach it, but but not close enough so that they can see it. Excuse me. Not at the height there they can see it easily. If it's within their direct eyesight, then they're liable to unlock the door and go. So a deadbolt lock above the door, above their eyesight, covering the door with a curtain, the outside door with a curtain, may make them think that it's not there, just the door isn't there. Disguising the outside door by making, say, if it's a glass door, making window panes on it so that they look like a window and not a door. That can help camouflage it. Occasionally, for some people, putting a black rug down in front of the door on the inside sometimes looks to them, and this is later in the disease, looks to them like a black hole, and they won't cross the door. And that's a way to do it. Sometimes very simply putting on the inside face of the door, be it front or back door, a stop sign may work. Just says stop but don't go. Or possibly that yellow or orange tape that is used at construction sites that indicates danger. Putting a sign up that says keep out, danger. Sometimes something that simple will work and they will turn around and go back. Nothing I say here is guaranteed, but it is all things that you can attempt to do to help minimize the accidents and the bad occurrences around the house. If, like I say, to sort of wrap this up, if you can make a sort of loose plan to walk the house at the first time and look at the things that are the most dangerous for them at this current level, and try and fix them, then to plan to revisit this in 3 months, 6 months, take another walk around the house and look to see what might now additionally be dangerous for that person given the progression of the disease, and do that on a regular basis every few months. You may be able to head off some of the worst occurrences that unfortunately happen, that cause people to go to, the loved ones to go to a hospital. Okay, that's my basic. Now I'm ready to entertain questions if there are any.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for spending the afternoon with us. We do have a bunch of questions, so yeah, let's get right into it. First of all, we have two questions that are, I guess, somewhat related. The first one is how you can make a room or part of a room kind of off limits without giving offense. And the second question is how you might, it's actually kind of a variation of the questions, what tips you might give in terms of keeping someone who is maybe a little bit stubborn in terms of going into certain rooms from entering some of these rooms that are less safe, more in the danger zone part of the house.
Okay, excellent questions. Let me take the second one first. We all have our patterns. We all have our favorite rooms, and if there is too much in that room that can't be put away, or made inaccessible for that person, and the room really needs to be locked, then you may say things like, and if the room is locked, you can put up the danger, or, do not go in, keep out, that sort of thing. And if they insist, one of the things that you can do is tell them that the room is actually unsafe. And you have to sort of make up what I call therapeutic fibs, something that would make sense to them. Like if it's a computer room, one of the computers busted or fizzed out, and there's wires on the floor there that could be live. It's very difficult to think on the fly, but it's something like that. Use a therapeutic fib that is close to the truth, but makes sense to them, why they can't go in there. Maybe there was water on the floor that you haven't cleaned up yet, and something like that. For the room where it's okay, except for this or that other portion, probably the best thing to do is to get it out of the person's eyesight, either by putting away the things, or maybe even using a curtain or some furniture to block off that portion of the room that is dangerous for them. The theory behind that is if they can't see it, then they don't know it's there, and eventually they'll forget about it. And everything I say is sort of a more than a one-time thing. Just because you do something one time doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hold, but the door on the door, the sign on the door, it has to get to be a pattern with them. So blocking off the portion of the room, and getting somebody to help move furniture to block it off, that's the sort of thing that might work even with stubborn people. The problem is, of course, you just have to keep at it and keep at it. It's dangerous for this reason. It's dangerous for that reason. The plumbing, plumbing broke, and the plumber's got to come. Therapeutic fibs. Okay, I think that's all I can do right now.
Thank you. No, I think it definitely people maybe. It seems American culture, we try to always be truthful, but sometimes it just it's sometimes maybe not the way to go in these specific cases. So thank you for that answer. We have another question about let us see. The oven switch. This should be a relatively straightforward question that you mentioned. The kind of the shutoff valve, or the kind of unseen kill switch. Is that something that would be between the oven plug and the outlet, or between the gas? Is that something that a homeowner can install themselves, or is it something you would have like a specialist come in and do? Hmm. Sure, sure. Great, thank you. Yeah, it seems yeah, definitely, yeah, it's always nicer and more peace of mind in terms of going with someone like a licensed plumber or electrician. But yeah, that's certainly good information. I am definitely not handy, so it's not something I would probably try myself. We have a question. Actually, I didn't even think about this angle. It's a very interesting question. It's a listener who has pets. So the father has a dog, but the dog tends to, kind of every so often run out of the house. So of course the dad, who is really fond of the dog, will do his best to actually try and find the dog. So do you have any ideas? Obviously the dog, is going to stay. I mean, getting rid of the dog is a non-starter. Do you have any ideas on kind of marrying this idea of the therapeutic, aspect of this dog with a house safe zone and keeping this listener's father from wandering, trying to find the dog?
Right, right. Okay, so uh, if the backyard is fenced, that's the obvious answer. Let the dog run all over the place in the backyard. I mean, normally dogs, need to go out, right? If the backyard is not fenced, or there's no fence in the front yard, then we have the huge issue. Um, and sometimes you can't stop it if the dog goes out of the house, and the father wants to go after it. That's just, locking him in is not a good option, because he'll get agitated, of course. Um, um, I'm wondering if the they can cut a dog door in the back of the house, to where someplace it gets fenced. I mean, the obvious thing, I guess, is to build a fence on the back of the yard so everybody can go out. If you can't do that, then we're talking about we're talking about the horses out of the barn. Then you need to get the tracking device for dad. And there's lots of tracking devices. There's cheap ones, like the Alzheimer's Association, that will, when he's missing, it's a phone number to call. Or now there's lots of them, lots of tracking devices that are cellular, GPS, all sorts of stuff. Even in people's shoes, they have a set of shoes that you can buy that have tracking devices in them. So, if there's no way to keep them in, then you can at least track them when they get out. But it's sort of the horse out of the barn thing. So.
Thanks. So, this actually brings up a question I personally wanted to ask about, these kind of maybe smart home technologies or these other kind of, as you mentioned. I know I read an article about a year ago about, I think it was a middle school student who did just that. He created, it was maybe a sock with a tracking device where, it's something that you wouldn't think to take off you. So there's less risk of the person thinking to take it off. But in terms of these kind of, smart technologies, or these technologies, I guess, designed to work with caregivers, with the person they're watching out with in their home, either tracking or some of these kind of kitchen technologies. Do you have any particular thoughts, pros and cons, or any strong feelings? Do you think there's a good thing for people to investigate these various technologies?
That's a really good question. You're right. There are, you know, technologies all over the place now. And my thought is, you know, you have to strike a balance between privacy and their privacy and your need to know. Um, there are things that I guess I would call in the middle, and those are systems that work with motion detectors. And a set of motion detectors can be put on in the door jamb of their bedroom, a motion detector in the entrance to the kitchen, so on and so forth, so that you can tell where they are going, and a motion detector in the bathroom, of course. You can tell where they're going, but you don't absolutely have video capability. I call that the middle road. Sometimes you really want to have the full bore video capability, and those systems are available, and as long as the person is not aware of being videoed, and the fact that there's limited amount of people being able to see him or her on their smartphone or whatever their receptor is, I don't have any problem with that for tracking. So I guess I fall on the side of safety versus privacy. I would fall on the side of safety once something happened. I think it has to happen first. And then you would know that the lesser of the evils is tracking this person rather than, you know, giving them the utmost privacy. That's my answer.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
And of course, yeah, the whole kind of impetus behind this webinar is that we're trying to, the idea is you want to keep someone out of the hospital, which can really kind of wreak havoc on someone with dementia in terms of, I know you and I were talking about it in terms of increasing the severity of just of their dementia, which you would not necessarily expect from just going to a hospital, which you assume is kind of just a physical treatment that you wouldn't expect it to affect cognition, but it can and often does. So, yeah, that seems like a good way to do it. You want to value their privacy as much as possible until the point where you think it's a trade-off between privacy and safety. Also, as an aside, we have a two-part webinar on this. It's more about the technology aspect, and it's a little bit more broad in terms of could be someone with cognitive difficulties or someone with physical impairments or both. But it's called New Ways to Care. It's on our FCA webinar page, caregiver.org. New Ways to Care, and it's a two-part webinar on some of these different technologies and maybe some things to think about, as Carol has brought up, in terms of some of the trade-offs for you and for the person that is going to have to be living with these technologies. Let's see. You mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that you really don't want to try, and it might have all been in caps, that you really don't want to try and do everything at once, because adding that to all the myriad tasks and kind of things that caregivers do might just be a little bit too much. So in terms of bang for your buck, what would you recommend, some steps that would be easy in terms of time and cost, if any, that have good returns in terms of doing getting the most out of the time in terms of that you're going to invest in to make the home safer?
Okay, so uh, probably the biggest reason that people go to the hospital, get hurt, is falling. So picking up the rugs or tacking them down is probably the very first thing that you should think about doing. Um, After that, it would be lighting. That would be a night light in the hall and a night light in the bathroom. And those are quick and easy ways to minimize, to have a little more safety. After that, you want to address the bathroom and the kitchen, and not necessarily in that order, but in the kitchen you would put away things that might hurt them that are out in the open, like knives would go in a drawer, medicines would go in a locked cabinet, and only the pill box, and everybody should be using pill boxes. Only the pill box for the week should be out. That minimizes their chance of taking, 50 of their meds rather than, just one at a time. So getting out of view in the bathroom and the kitchen, things that would hurt them, is probably the easiest for those two. And finally, grab bars. When we're talking about having to spend money, getting grab bars for the tub or the shower, and a shower chair if they're bad on their feet. Getting the grab bars installed really will make a big difference. So that's, I would say, a few things that are good bang for the buck.
Perfect, thank you. I think that'll definitely help people in terms of thinking maybe in terms of maybe some of the priorities in terms of going from A to B to C, and starting with some of the fall hazards, as you mentioned, which I know I read recently, I think the CDC, that I think even among all seniors that falls are the #1 cause of injury and death, which kind of makes sense. I mean, we all, it's no one likes to fall, so I can definitely see how that could be, one of these major dangers that we probably don't think of. We think of other things maybe that are maybe a little bit more sensational, but not quite as statistically significant. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Let's see. This is a listener. Okay, so you mentioned in the webinar about how natural light can be a real help in moods for people with dementia. So you want to really try and keep, give them as much natural light as possible, and if and really make sure they can get as much of that sunlight as they can get. This listener, it looks like they had a question about room colors. Are there any colors that might, in terms of the walls, that might help with agitation or help relaxation, or would that maybe be a little bit jarring to one day, if you have some form of dementia, to find a room that was white, I don't know, say pink or blue or green? Are there any colors that might help, or is it there's no real information on that for or against?
There is information on that, and I'm glad they asked. For your respite room, for your quiet time room for them, you would want a pale yellow or a pale green, nothing vibrant at all, but a pale yellow, a pale green, even sometimes a medium beige. They are very, very, very helpful, very relaxing, and there have been tests on this, and there's been research on this, for the calming down. The colors that you don't want are the reds, the blues, the oranges, the vibrant colors, because that tends to make people agitated. If you have to use those colors on things that you can put away, like pillows, turn them over, or, you know, a throw on a bed or something that you can put away. So.
Perfect, thanks. Well, that's I like that advice. I used to live in a very small apartment with a basement apartment with lime green, and it seemed it seemed to work. So that does make a lot of sense. Anyways, I think that is all the time we have for today. Carol, if the listeners want to get in touch with you, would you mind letting them know again your web address and your email where they can reach you out, or if they want to know more about your company, or if they're in the North Texas area and they'd like maybe you to come over and do an assessment of their home? Is there, if you could give them your contact information again?
Sure, be happy to. My email is the name of my company, Third Age Services with an S @gmail.com. The website is www.thirdageservices.com, and all this information, the contact information is available there too. Email, website, my phone number is on the website, so you can call me. I do consultations, so I'm more than happy to consult with you via email, Skype. I don't care. You want a consultation, I will do that. So thanks, Calvin.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for spending this time with us today. I know you're all very busy, so we really do appreciate that. Again, I'd like to thank Carol for being with us this afternoon. Our FCA webinars are a free and continuing series, so you can find out more information about our next webinar or look at our webinar archives, including the webinar on in-home technologies at www.caregiver.org. So the webinar is now concluded, and we hope to see you all next time. Have a great afternoon.